In this lesson, we'll create a drawing of a field of poppies using pastels in about an hour. Hello there everyone, Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and in this lesson we're going to create a small pastel sketch of some poppies in a field using Rembrandt pastels on PastelMat paper. So let's go ahead and dive right in. In this lesson, we'll be working with Rembrandt pastels, and we'll be working on PastelMat paper, which is a wonderful surface that features a deceptively deep tooth, which will allow us to put lots of layers on the surface. We'll start here on the PastelMat paper. We're going to work from the background to the middle ground to the foreground. Since we're using traditional soft pastels, we can layer over the top of our applications with opaque applications, making them perform a little bit more like opaque painting mediums like acrylics and oils. We're going to start here with a very light yellow. This may appear white, but it is actually a very, very light yellow. And we're just going to go right across the top of the sky, adding quite a bit of the material to the surface. Once we have the base applications for our sky in place, we'll go ahead and start defining the shapes of the poppies that are here in the foreground. We're going to start here with a red that leans a little bit towards orange. This is very similar to a primary red. It's just a little bit warmer, so slightly more of a red-orange. And we're going to define these shapes very loosely, as you can see, before switching over to a purple to define the shape for the distant mountain range. Layering your applications is incredibly important when working with pastels. So we don't want to think of these initial applications as our final applications. We can apply these colors relatively loosely, as you see here, and just get some color in place. And this color is what we're going to build upon to build up the depth in the color and create a more representational finished product. Now we'll go ahead and start adding a little bit of depth to the color here with the blue over the top of our purple applications. We're going to change the directional stroking just a bit, making more vertical strokes here and allow some mixing with this particular application. Now we're going to add another light yellow. This is a little bit darker than our original one. It may look a little bit like a khaki or a tan, but it's actually a very light yellow ochre. If we look at our reference, we can see that the color close to where the sky meets the mountains is a little bit more yellow, so this will help create that illusion. And we're going to add just a touch of light blue at the top and begin creating a transition from that light blue to that light yellow. Once the blue is added, we can go back with that same very light yellow and create a smoother transition. You'll notice that we're filling in a lot of the tooth at this point and covering up much of the visible paper. Now we're going to take a very light purple and go over the top of our mountain range. We've used purple and blue and now a very light purple here. This is going to lighten the value so that the value matches more like what we see in the reference. Here again, we're going to begin filling in the tooth of the paper, so we're making heavier applications at this point. Now, the mountains on the right side of the picture plane are a little closer to the viewer, so I'll add just a bit more of blue over the top and then a bit more purple as well to make the value slightly darker than the distant mountains behind it. Now we'll start adding some more colors to our poppies. We're going to start with an orange here. You can see our poppies are a very warm red, meaning they lean a little bit more towards yellow opposed to leaning more towards blue on the color wheel. So we're going to use more yellows and oranges here as we develop them. We'll start with a simple orange before moving on to a deeper red. With this deeper red, we're concentrating on the areas where we see the values being a little bit darker. Our light source in the scene is originating from the right side. This means that the colors on the right side of the poppies are going to be warmer, and the value for these areas are going to be lighter. The areas of shadow are going to exist on the left side of the poppies, and the colors might be a little cooler there as well. So now we're using a yellow-orange over the top of our red shapes to start bringing out some of those warmer colors that we see on the right side of the poppies. To make our shadows a little bit darker, we'll use a darker gray here initially. This first application is going to seem rather strong, but as we apply more layers to the surface, these shadows, or this gray application at least, will melt into the body of the poppies. It's important to note that we're thinking about the shapes of color and value that we see instead of thinking in more linear terms. So we're thinking more so like a painter, just paying attention to the shapes of color and value that we see. Now we'll switch over to a warmer red here. This is more of a red-orange, but it's pretty close to a primary red. And we'll go over to the top of the shadow applications that we made, and there'll be some mixing that occurs here. And you can see that those shadows get toned down quite a bit, but they're still darker in value. Now we'll go back with a peach and we'll start pulling out some of the highlights that we see. Again, concerning ourselves mainly with the shapes of color and value that we see. Then it's back again with our dark gray, again reestablishing some of those shadowed areas. And you can see this is why layering is so important with pastels, because we often have to put multiple layers down to get the right color and value that we need. This is also why it's very important to work on paper that has a heavy tooth, meaning that it has a heavy texture. That will allow the pastels to be layered on the surface. If you work on a smoother surface, you won't be able to get near as many layers of pastel applications. Now, before working down the picture plane, we'll do a quick blend of the sky and the mountains, and then it's back to layering additional applications here on the poppies, trying to get those shapes of light and dark values in the right locations. And we're just using, again, more warmer colors on the right side of the bodies of the poppies and cooler and darker values on the left side of the poppies. I'm going to add just a touch of yellow-green here for some contrast, and I also see that I need to go back into the sky and make the light yellow at the very bottom close to the mountain range a little bit lighter. So after adding a little bit of green around the poppies, I add that much lighter yellow there to the bottom of the sky. I also use this much lighter yellow here to create some additional highlights on the body of the poppies on the right side closer to the light source. Then it's back to the sky, smoothing the transition between the light values at the top and the even lighter values at the bottom. Then we can go back to the poppies here, adding additional highlights with a very light orange. And we're going to go ahead and start darkening in some of the shapes behind the poppies in the distant background. These are the distant trees, and you'll notice how dark they are in value. So we're using a very dark brown here initially just to establish the shapes. Down just a touch of light yellow-green into the field underneath the distant tree line. Next, we'll start adding some color to those distant trees with a dark yellow-green. We're going to be using this just to touch the upper edges of the distant trees, indicating some areas of highlight. And we'll define the edges of the trees a little bit more with some negative painting. So we're going in with a light purple here and defining the overall shapes of the tops of the distant trees. Now we'll add a slightly lighter yellow-green, again, just establishing some of the highlights from the tops of these distant trees. Now these highlights aren't evident in the photo reference, but they're going to make our painting look a little bit more believable and realistic. Now it's back to the sky, adding a little bit of warmth here, again with a light yellow ochre. Now we're going to add a slightly darker yellow-green over the top of our light yellow-green, pulling strokes downward. And as these applications are made, you can see that some mixing will occur, creating a light yellow-green that's closer to what we see in the reference. We're going to leave a little bit of space here at the bottom for our taller grasses in the foreground. And now we'll grab a light yellow-green and start establishing those. You'll see that this yellow-green is a little bit darker than the more yellow-greens we used in the middle ground. We're going to start by just pulling strokes upward as the taller grasses grow, and we're going to try to create a little bit of rhythm and motion here in our stroking, as now we've reached for a darker, cooler gray. This darker, cooler gray is going to establish some of the areas of shadow that we see in between the grass blades. Now, when we're creating the illusion of space in a painting or drawing, we need to consider contrast in value. Contrast in value is going to be stronger as we get closer towards the viewer. So here in our foreground, we're going to have a little bit more contrast than what we would see in the background, meaning our darks are going to be a little bit darker and our lights are going to be a little bit lighter. And we'll keep this in mind as we continue to develop the grasses in the foreground. Now a bit of light yellow-green is added with a few strokes before I see the need to go back and make some of the portions of the field a little bit more yellow. We'll add a little bit of yellow here in the foreground as well, adding just a few wisps of the grasses before switching over to a very dark brown. Now this dark brown is going to establish that strong contrast here in the foreground by making some of the shadowed areas nice and dark. We'll also pull up a few strokes with a dark green here. You can see just how dark this green is. And as we get towards the end of the grass blades, we'll be sure to make sure that stroke tapers a bit, mimicking the shape of the grass itself. We'll continue to add a variety of different greens. Most of these greens are yellow-green, but some of these are definitely a little bit cooler. The more variety you can create in your color, the more the image is going to look representational. We'll go ahead and pull up a few strokes here indicating the stems of some of the poppies, and we'll do so with a very light yellow-green initially. We'll just connect these to the upper portion of the poppy and then pull it down into the grassy field. We'll also add a few of those poppies that haven't quite bloomed here, so just the little buds. And then we're going to add a little bit of a darker green to create a little bit of form here. So this darker green line is going to be a broken line that we're using on this particular stem, indicating a bit of shadow on the left side of the stem. And as we start creating this strong contrast in the foreground, the illusion of light starts to make more sense. Now, let's add a few of the other colors that we see in the field. We'll add a bit of purple here and there. We do see some hints of some purple flowers in this field. And we'll also add a few hints of some of the smaller poppy flowers that are seen off in the distance. We'll start here with a bit of orange, and that will be followed by a bit of red later in the process. And then it's back to our grass in the foreground, continuing to add a variety of different greens. You can see we're starting to develop a sense of rhythm here as most of our strokes are flowing at somewhat of a diagonal up to the left from the bottom of the right. We'll also have some curved flower stems in there as well, so for some added variety. We'll go ahead and soften up the edge between the sky and the mountains to make this look like it's a little bit further off in the distance before adding a bit more red to some of our smaller poppy shapes. Now I'm going to add just a touch of blue to the distant trees, just to add a little bit more color interest and make those shadows feel a little bit cooler before darkening them up a little bit more with the dark brown. Now we'll add just a couple of finishing touches, making some of the colors a little bit bolder and also adding a few hints of highlight here and there. And now at this point, I've spent about an hour on the drawing, and our field of poppies completed with pastels is complete.
Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were able to pick up a couple of things here and there. Remember, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and click on the notification bell. And if you like this video, make sure you give it a like. And you should also check out the membership program over at thevirtualinstructor.com. There we have a variety of drawing and painting courses on a variety of subject matter and media. Weekly live lessons, which are all recorded and stored in our vault. These live lessons are broadcast in real time to members, but they're all recorded so you can watch all of the live lesson series we've ever done. Weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute, and there's also a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers, which includes everything you need to teach. If you want to check out our membership program, you can check it out for free for a week. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can go check it out. If you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, I'll also leave a link for that in the description below. That will also put you on our mailing list so I can send you tons of free art lessons. As always, thanks again for watching, and I wish you all the very best in your artistic success.